I used to think that being needed was the same thing as being loved. For most of my life, I wore that belief like a second skin, so close to me that I didn't even know it was there. I was 35 years old before I understood the difference. 35 years old before I realized that some people will drain you drop by drop and call it family, call it love, call it loyalty. My name is Olivia, and this is the story of how I learned to let go. But it's also the story of everything that came before that, the years of giving, the slow erosion of myself, the 1,000 small moments that led me to a breaking point I never saw coming. Part 1. The Good Daughter. I think it started when I was 7 years old. My father had just left, packed his bags one Tuesday morning while my mother sobbed in their bedroom, and my little sister Naomi, only 3 years old, clung to my leg asking why Mommy was crying. I remember standing in the hallway of our small house, still in my pajamas with the pink flowers, watching Dad carry his suitcase to the car. He didn't look at me. Not once. After he drove away, I went to my mother. She was sitting on the edge of her bed, mascara streaking down her face, her whole body shaking with the kind of crying that sounds like it's being torn out of you. "It's okay, Mommy," I said, climbing up beside her. "I'll help you. I'll be good." "I promise I'll be really, really good." She pulled me into her arms and held me so tightly I could barely breathe. "You're my strong girl," she whispered into my hair. "My strong, good girl. I don't know what I'd do without you." And something in me shifted that day. Some fundamental understanding of my place in the world. I was the strong one, the good one, the one who held things together when everything else was falling apart. I was 7 years old, and I just learned that my value came from what I could do for other people. My childhood after that was a series of lessons in self-sacrifice disguised as family loyalty. My mother worked 2 jobs, one at a diner during the day, another cleaning offices at night. Money was always tight, always a source of anxiety that hummed beneath every conversation. I learned to ask for nothing, to make my school clothes last an extra year, to tell her I wasn't hungry when there wasn't quite enough food for everyone, to babysit Naomi every day after school while my mother worked, even though I desperately wanted to join the drama club or try out for soccer. "You're such a good sister," my mother would say, kissing the top of my head before she left for her evening shift. So responsible, so mature. I glowed under that praise. Lived for it. Because if I was good enough, helpful enough, responsible enough, maybe she'd be happy. Maybe she'd stop looking so tired and sad. Maybe I could fix what my father had broken when he left. Naomi, meanwhile, was the baby, the sensitive one, the one who got to cry and throw tantrums and demand attention. She was allowed to be a child in a way I never was. And I didn't resent her for it, not then, anyway. I just accepted it as the natural order of things. She needed more. I needed less. That's how it was. By the time I was 12, I was doing all the grocery shopping, most of the cooking, and managing Naomi's schedule for school and activities. My mother had started dating again, a series of men who were never quite right, who sometimes helped with bills and sometimes made things worse. I learned to make myself small and quiet when they were around, to read the emotional temperature of the house and adjust accordingly. I got straight A's in school. Not because anyone pushed me, but because I thought it might make my mother proud. Thought it might be one less thing for her to worry about. She barely noticed. There was always something more urgent, more pressing. A broken water heater, Naomi's drama with friends, another fight with whatever boyfriend was currently in the picture. "You don't need me to tell you you're doing well," my mother said once, when I'd brought home a perfect report card. "You already know. But Naomi needs extra encouragement. You understand?" "She's not as naturally confident as you are," I understood. I always understood. High school was when I first started to feel the weight of it all. Not consciously, I couldn't have articulated it then, but in the way my chest felt tight sometimes, for no reason. In the way I'd lie awake at night, making mental lists of everything I needed to do for everyone else. In the way I'd started having stress headaches that made the world seem too bright, too loud. I had friends, but I kept them at a distance. I never invited anyone over because our house was always chaotic, always a little embarrassing. I never went to parties or football games because Naomi needed to be picked up from her activities or my mother needed me home to help with something. There was one boy, Marcus, who seemed interested in me. He was in my English class, tall and funny, with dark eyes and a smile that made my stomach flip. He asked me to homecoming. I wanted to say yes so badly, wanted it with an ache that surprised me. But the dance was on the same night as Naomi's 9th birthday party, a party my mother had promised to throw but hadn't actually planned. I spent the week before homecoming organising everything, ordering a cake, decorating our living room with streamers, inviting Naomi's friends, planning games and activities. On the night of the dance, I stood in the kitchen serving birthday cake to giggling 9-year-olds while Marcus was at homecoming with Stephanie Chen, who wore a blue dress and got to be a normal teenager. My mother never even acknowledged the sacrifice, never seemed to realise I'd given up something important. To her, it was just what I did, what I'd always done. I went to college on a full academic scholarship, a state school 3 hours away from home. It was the first time in my life I'd been away from my family, and I felt guilty about the relief that came with it. Guilty about how much lighter I felt walking across campus without the constant weight of everyone else's needs on my shoulders. I called home every Sunday. My mother would talk for an hour, updating me on her latest boyfriend problems, her work stress, the difficulties she was having with Naomi, who was now a difficult 13-year-old. She rarely asked about my classes, my friends, my life. "I'm so glad you called," she'd say at the end of every conversation. "I really needed to talk. You're the only one who understands." I sent money home when I could, small amounts from my work-study job in the library. $20 here, $50 there. Whatever I could spare. My mother never asked for it directly, but she'd mention how expensive things were, how hard it was to make ends meet, and I'd feel that familiar pull of responsibility. During my sophomore year, I met a man named Robert. He was a graduate student in environmental science, 6 years older than me, with kind eyes and a calmness about him that I found deeply attractive. He was the first person I'd ever dated seriously, and being with him felt like coming up for air after years underwater. Robert was patient with me, patient with the way I always prioritised everyone else's needs over my own, patient with the fact that I spent half our dates on the phone dealing with family crises, patient with how difficult it was for me to accept help or let anyone take care of me. "You don't have to fix everything for everyone," he told me once after I'd spent an entire evening stressed about a problem Naomi was having at school. "You're allowed to just be a college student, to focus on your own life." I nodded, but I didn't really understand what he meant. How could I focus on my own life when my family needed me? We dated for 3 years. He was the first person who made me feel truly seen, truly valued for who I was, rather than what I could do. He proposed during my senior year, in the library where we'd first met, with a simple silver ring and tears in his eyes. I said yes without hesitation. My mother's response when I called to tell her was lukewarm at best. "That's nice, honey," she said, sounding distracted. "Listen, I need to talk to you about something. It's about Naomi. She's been accepted to that performing arts summer camp she wanted to go to, but it's expensive. I was thinking maybe you and Robert could help with the cost, as a graduation gift for her." I felt something deflate inside me. "Mom, I just told you I'm getting married." "I know, and I'm happy for you. But this is important. Naomi's been working so hard, and this could really be good for her confidence. You know how sensitive she is." I sent her a check for $800, money I'd been saving for wedding expenses. Robert was frustrated when I told him, "Olivia, we need that money, and it's not your responsibility to pay for your sister's summer camp." "I know," I said, "but my mom really needs help, and Naomi—" "Naomi is not your child," he said, more firmly than he usually spoke. "She has a mother. You're not responsible for raising her." We had our first real fight that night. He accused me of not having boundaries. I accused him of not understanding family loyalty. We both said things we didn't mean, voices raised in the small apartment we'd started sharing. Later, lying in bed with our backs to each other, I felt a creeping fear that maybe he was right, that maybe I didn't know how to say no, that maybe my family was taking advantage of me. But I pushed the thought away. Because if that was true, what did it mean? That my whole life had been built on a lie? That the people I loved most didn't actually love me back? No. Easier to believe that Robert just didn't understand, that he didn't come from the kind of family where you sacrificed for each other. We got married in a small ceremony at a local park. It was beautiful in its simplicity, just close friends, some of Robert's family and my mother and Naomi. My mother complained about the location, about having to take time off work, about the fact that we weren't having it in a church. Naomi spent the entire reception on her phone, barely speaking to anyone. But Robert looked at me like I was the only person in the world, and for a few hours I let myself believe that maybe this was the beginning of something different. A life where I came first, where I was chosen. We were happy for a while. Robert got a job with an environmental consulting firm. I started working for a non-profit that helped at-risk youth, a job that felt meaningful, purposeful, like maybe all my years of taking care of others had prepared me for something good. We moved into a small one-bedroom apartment with big windows and a tiny balcony where I grew herbs in pots. I started to understand what it felt like to be in a relationship where the giving went both ways, where my needs mattered, where I didn't have to earn love through constant service. But my family still pulled at me like gravity. My mother called constantly, usually with financial emergencies. The car needed repairs, the rent had gone up, she'd lost one of her jobs and needed help making ends meet. Each time I felt that old familiar guilt rising up. Each time I sent money, Robert grew increasingly frustrated. "We're trying to save for a house," he'd say, looking at our dwindling bank account. "We have our own goals, our own future to think about." "I know," I'd say. "This is the last time, I promise." But it was never the last time. 3 years into our marriage, Robert got a job offer in Seattle. It was a huge opportunity, a significant raise, work he was passionate about. He was excited, energized in a way I hadn't seen in months. "What do you think?" he asked, spreading out the details on our kitchen table. "It would be a fresh start. We could actually afford to buy a house there, start that family we've been talking about." Seattle. 3,000 miles from my mother and Naomi. 3,000 miles from the constant calls and emergencies and demands. I felt a flutter of something that might have been hope. But when I told my mother, her reaction was immediate and visceral. "You can't move across the country," she said, her voice rising in panic. "What about me? What about Naomi? We need you here, Olivia. You can't just abandon your family." "It's not abandoning. It is. You're choosing him over us, over your own blood." The guilt was crushing. I tried to explain it to Robert, how my mother was getting older, how Naomi was still figuring out her life, how they needed me nearby. He listened, but I could see the disappointment in his eyes. "What about what we need?" he asked quietly. "What about our life?" "This is a huge decision," I said. "We can't just rush into it. I'm not asking you to rush, I'm asking you to choose us, to choose our future together." But choosing Robert felt like betraying my mother, like proving her right, that I was selfish, that I put others before family. Robert took the job, I stayed behind. We tried long distance for 8 months, but the distance wasn't just geographical. It was emotional, a growing chasm between us that no amount of phone calls or weekend visits could bridge. He needed a partner who was fully present, fully committed to building a life with him. And I was still trying to save my family, still caught in patterns I couldn't break. We divorced quietly, amicably, sadly. He cried when we signed the papers, so did I. "I love you," he said, "but I can't compete with your family, and I don't think you know how to let anyone love you more than you love being needed." His words haunted me for years afterward, because deep down I knew he was right. Part 2. The slow erosion. After the divorce, I threw myself even deeper into my family's needs. It was easier than examining why my marriage had failed, easier than acknowledging the patterns Robert had tried to show me. I was 32 years old, living alone in my small apartment, and I told myself I was fine. I had my job, I had my routine, I had my family who needed me, which meant I had purpose. Naomi had graduated high school by then, barely, and was drifting between part-time jobs and bad relationships. She'd had a baby at 19, a little boy named Dylan. The father disappeared before Dylan was even born, and Naomi moved back in with our mother, overwhelmed and unprepared for single motherhood. I helped however I could. Baby supplies, diapers, money for daycare so Naomi could work. Hours of babysitting Dylan while Naomi went out with friends or worked or just needed a break from the exhaustion of new motherhood. Dylan was a sweet baby with dark curls and Naomi's brown eyes. I loved him immediately, fiercely. And I told myself that all the time and money I was investing was worth it, that I was helping raise a good human being, that this was what family did. But Naomi rarely thanked me, rarely acknowledged everything I was doing. When I'd show up to babysit, she'd leave immediately, often not returning when she said she would. When I'd buy Dylan new clothes because he'd outgrown everything, she'd barely glance at them before asking if I could pick up some groceries too. My mother was no better. She'd started having health problems, arthritis in her hands, high blood pressure, chronic pain that seemed to migrate around her body. She went to doctor after doctor, accumulated medications and diagnoses, talked endlessly about her symptoms. I went with her to appointments, picked up her prescriptions, called her insurance company to argue about coverage, brought her groceries because shopping was too painful, drove her to physical therapy appointments she'd inevitably complain about the entire time. And always, always, there was the money. "I don't know how I'm going to pay this medical bill," she'd sigh, showing me yet another invoice. "They want $200. I just don't have it." I'd pull out my checkbook, trying not to think about how my own savings were dwindling, trying not to calculate how many years it would be before I could afford to buy a house, take a real vacation, retire someday. My mother never suggested a payment plan, never asked if I could afford it, just accepted my checks with a brief thanks and moved on to the next crisis. I kept a spreadsheet. I told myself it wasn't because I was keeping score, but because I needed to understand where my money was going, needed some kind of documentation for my own sanity. By the time I turned 33, I'd given my mother over $25,000. I'd given Naomi another $15,000, not counting all the things I'd bought for Dylan. I'd spent countless hours doing things for them, errands, childcare, emotional support, practical help. And I was exhausted. Bone deep, soul tired, exhausted. I started having anxiety attacks. They'd come out of nowhere, my chest would tighten, my breath would get shallow, and I'd feel like I was drowning in air. My doctor prescribed medication and suggested therapy. I took the medication but told myself I didn't have time for therapy. I didn't have time for anything, really. My entire life had become about managing everyone else's crises while my own needs got pushed further and further into the background. I stopped seeing friends, stopped pursuing hobbies, stopped doing anything that was just for me. Because there was always something more urgent. Always someone who needed me more than I needed, whatever it was I thought I needed. Self-care felt selfish, rest felt lazy, boundaries felt cruel. Then Naomi's boyfriend kicked her out. It was 2 weeks before my 33rd birthday. She called me at midnight, crying so hard I could barely understand her. Something about a fight, about him throwing her things out, about having nowhere to go. "Can I stay with you?" she sobbed. "Just for a little while. Please, Liv, I have nowhere else." Dylan was at my mother's house. He stayed there most nights anyway, because Naomi's schedule was erratic, so it would just be Naomi, just my sister, who needed help. She stood in my doorway an hour later with 2 garbage bags full of clothes and makeup streaming down her face, and I felt that old familiar pull, the need to fix it, to make it better, to be the strong one. "Of course you can stay," I said, wrapping my arms around her, "as long as you need." She collapsed into my hug, and I felt her whole body shaking with sobs. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you, thank you. You're the only one who's ever there for me." In that moment, I felt needed, important. Like maybe all my sacrifice meant something after all. I should have known better. The first few days were okay. Naomi was grateful, helpful even. She cleaned up after herself, bought groceries once, thanked me for letting her stay. But gratitude has a short shelf life when it's not backed by genuine appreciation. Within a week, her things had spread throughout my apartment like an invasive species. Clothes draped over furniture, makeup and hair products taking over the bathroom counter, shoes scattered by the door, dishes left in the sink. "Just until I get back on my feet," she'd say, whenever I gently tried to talk about timelines. I'm looking for a new job, I promise. Somewhere that pays better. Then I'll be able to afford my own place. But she wasn't really looking. Oh, she'd scroll through job listings on her phone occasionally, complain about how nothing paid enough or had the right hours, but she never actually applied anywhere. She worked part-time at a retail store, barely 20 hours a week, and spent her free time on her phone or out with friends. She never offered to help with rent or groceries, never even asked how much her staying was costing me. I started picking up extra hours at work, not because I needed to professionally, but because I needed the money. My budget, already stretched thin by family obligations, couldn't absorb another person without help. I was tired all the time. I'd come home from work and Naomi would be on the couch watching TV, and I'd feel this flash of resentment that I'd immediately smother with guilt. She's going through a hard time, I'd tell myself. She needs support. This is what sisters do. 2 weeks became a month became 3 months, 3 months became 6. My apartment, which had been my sanctuary, started to feel claustrophobic. I had no privacy, no space that was just mine. Naomi treated the place like a hotel, coming and going at all hours, bringing friends over without asking, eating my food, using my things. When I finally worked up the courage to ask her about contributing financially, her eyes filled with tears. I can't believe you're asking me for money, she said, her voice wounded. After everything I've been through, I thought you cared about me. I thought family was more important than money to you. The guilt was immediate and crushing. I do care about you. That's not what I just meant I'm struggling a bit with expenses, and if you could maybe chip in like $50 a month. I barely make enough to survive, she said. You know that. I'm sorry I'm such a burden to you. You're not a burden, I said quickly, desperately. I didn't mean it like that. Forget I said anything. She punished me with silence for 2 days, moving around the apartment like a ghost, making me feel like a terrible person for even bringing it up. I never asked again. Around month 7 of Naomi's temporary stay, I started seeing someone. His name was James, and I'd met him at a coffee shop near my office. He was a graphic designer, funny and attentive, with a gentle way of asking questions that made me feel heard. We'd gone on 3 dates when he suggested coming over to my place. I panicked. It's kind of messy right now, I lied. My sister is staying with me temporarily. And that's cool, he said easily. We can just hang out, order takeout. I'd like to see where you live. So I brought him home, after warning Naomi that I was having someone over and asking her, begging her, really, to maybe tidy up her stuff a little. She'd shrugged. Sure, whatever. When James and I arrived, the apartment looked like a tornado had hit it. Naomi's clothes were everywhere. Dishes were piled in the sink. She was sprawled on the couch in pajamas watching reality TV at a volume that made conversation difficult. "Oh, hey," she said, barely glancing at us. "I didn't realize you were coming so soon." James was polite, but I could see him taking it all in. The mess. The lack of privacy. The way Naomi didn't offer to give us space, just stayed on the couch like she owned the place. We ordered pizza and tried to have a conversation over the TV noise. James left earlier than I'd expected. "Your sister seems nice," he said at the door, but his tone suggested otherwise. "Listen, I'll call you, okay?" He didn't call. I cried that night, quietly, in my bedroom while Naomi laughed at her TV show in the living room. Not because I was heartbroken over James. We'd barely known each other. But because I was starting to realize that this was my life, that I'd let it become this, that somewhere along the way, I'd lost track of where I ended and my family's needs began. Part 3. The birthday. I turned 34 in September, and Naomi had been living with me for just over a year. I didn't plan anything special. By then, I'd learned not to have expectations around my birthday. My family had a long history of forgetting or overlooking it. Not out of malice, I told myself, but just because they had so much on their plates. I was low maintenance. Easy. I didn't need a fuss. But I'd mentioned it to Naomi a few days before, casually while we were both in the kitchen. "Oh, hey, my birthday's on Tuesday," I said, pouring myself coffee. "I think I'm just going to treat myself to dinner at Marcello's after work. That little Italian place downtown?" I've been wanting to go for ages. Naomi looked up from her phone. "Your birthday!" "Oh my God, we should do something. Don't make plans, okay? I'll figure something out. It'll be fun." I felt a little flutter of surprised pleasure. "Really? You don't have to." "I want to," she insisted, actually putting her phone down to look at me. "You do so much for everyone, Liv. Let me do this for you." For the next few days, I felt genuinely excited. It had been so long since anyone had planned something for me, since I'd felt like my existence was worth celebrating beyond what I could do for others. Tuesday arrived. I wore a dress I'd been saving, navy blue with small white flowers, fitted at the waist and falling to just below my knees. It made me feel pretty feminine in a way I didn't usually let myself feel. I even took time with my makeup, put on the perfume Robert had given me years ago that I rarely wore. At work, a few colleagues said happy birthday. My supervisor gave me a card. Small gestures, but they made me smile. I left work at 5:30, excited and nervous about whatever Naomi had planned. Would she take me to dinner? Invite a few people over? Maybe she'd bake something. She used to like baking when we were younger. I got home at 6. The apartment was empty. No Naomi. No note. No indication that anything was different from any other day. I texted her, "Hey, I'm home. What's the plan?" No response. I waited, trying not to feel disappointed. Maybe she was out picking up food or grabbing a cake or running late from some last-minute errand. 6:30 came, then 7, then 8. I called her. It went straight to voicemail. By 9, I'd changed out of my dress and into yoga pants and an old t-shirt. I'd washed off my makeup. I'd accepted that whatever she'd planned, if she'd planned anything at all, wasn't happening. I heated up leftover pasta and ate it standing at the counter, alone, in the apartment I paid for, on my 34th birthday. I tried not to cry, tried to tell myself it didn't matter, that birthdays were just arbitrary dates, nothing to get upset about, that Naomi had probably just gotten busy and forgotten, and I was being overly sensitive, expecting anything different. But the tears came anyway, quiet, defeated tears that had nothing to do with the birthday itself and everything to do with the realization that I didn't matter to the people I'd spent my whole life prioritizing. At 11:20, I heard Naomi's key in the lock. She came in laughing, stumbling slightly, clearly drunk. A man was with her, some guy I'd never seen before, with a backwards baseball cap and an oversized hoodie. He looked around the apartment with vague interest while Naomi dropped her purse on the floor and kicked off her shoes. "Oh my God, Liv," she said, her words slurring slightly. "You're still up. We had the most amazing night. There was this band at Murphy's and they were so good, and Jake here," she gestured at the man, "bought us drinks. And wait." She paused, squinting at me. "Why do you look like that?" "Like what?" My voice came out flat, emotionless. "Like, I don't know, upset or something." "It's my birthday," I said quietly. The room went silent. I watched the realization creep across her face. Confusion, then understanding, then something that might have been guilt but could also have been annoyance. "Oh, shit." She pressed her hand to her forehead. "I completely forgot. I'm sorry, Liv, but like, you could have just gone out yourself. You didn't have to sit here all night waiting." "You told me not to make plans," I said. "You said you'd figure something out, that you wanted to do something for me." She laughed, actually laughed, a short dismissive sound. "Okay, well, I forgot. I'm sorry. But honestly, you're being kind of dramatic about this. You're 34, not 4. It's just a birthday." The man, Jake, shifted uncomfortably by the door. He gave an awkward chuckle, like he was trying to lighten the mood. "Right," I said softly. "Just a birthday." Naomi was already moving toward the kitchen, pulling out a bottle of wine. "Do you want a glass? We could still celebrate if you want. Jake, this is my sister. She's usually not this uptight, I promise." I stood there in my own apartment, in my yoga pants, with dried tear tracks on my face, and I felt something inside me break. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a quiet final snap, like the last thread holding something together, finally giving way. "I'm going to bed," I said. Naomi shrugged, already focused on pouring wine. "Okay." I lay in bed for hours, listening to Naomi and Jake laughing in my living room, and I asked myself the question that should have been asked years ago. Why am I doing this? What was I getting out of this relationship? Out of any of my family relationships? What was I receiving that made all the giving worthwhile? I couldn't think of a single answer. Part 4. The Awakening. I called in sick the next day. Not because I was physically ill, but because I couldn't face going to work and pretending everything was normal. Couldn't put on the mask of competent, capable Olivia who had it all together. Naomi was still asleep when I got up. Jake was gone. The living room was a mess of wine glasses and empty takeout containers. I sat on my balcony with coffee and my phone, and I did something I never did. I put myself first. I called my insurance company and asked about therapists covered under my plan. The representative gave me a list of names and numbers. I picked one at random, Dr. Sarah Chen, a woman whose profile said she specialized in family dynamics and boundary setting. I called and made an appointment for the following week. Then I did something else I'd never done. I opened my banking app and really looked at my finances. Not the quick glances I usually did, the ones where I'd wince and close the app before absorbing the full reality. But a real, honest assessment. My checking account was always hovering near empty, usually a few $100s, never more. My savings account, which had once had nearly $15,000 in it, now had $847. I was 34 years old, working a full-time job, and I had less than $1,000 in savings. I felt sick. Physically sick. Because where had it all gone? I knew, of course, I had the spreadsheet, but seeing it all together, the years of money given away, the thousands of dollars spent supporting people who never seemed to get any more stable despite my help, was devastating. I'd sacrificed my marriage, my financial security, my emotional well-being, and for what? For a sister who forgot my birthday? For a mother who only called when she needed something? For a nephew I loved but rarely saw unless they needed me to babysit? Naomi emerged from the bedroom around noon, looking rough. She went straight for the coffee pot without saying anything to me. I watched her from the balcony doorway. Really watched her, like I was seeing her for the first time. She was 25 years old. Young, yes, but not a child. Not incapable. She was perfectly able to work full-time, to save money, to take care of herself. She just didn't, because she'd never had to. Because there was always someone, our mother, me, her various boyfriends, who would step in and handle things for her. "We need to talk," I said. She groaned. "Can we not? I have a massive headache." "Naomi, you've been living here for over a year." I know, okay? I'm working on saving up for my own place. It's just taking longer than I thought." "You work 20 hours a week," I said, keeping my voice steady, "and you go out drinking 3 or 4 nights a week. You're not saving because you're not trying to save." What? She turned to face me, anger flashing in her eyes. "Wow, so now you're judging how I spend my money?" "I'm not judging. I need you to find somewhere else to live." The words hung in the air between us. "Are you serious right now?" Her voice had gone high and sharp. "You're kicking me out? I'm asking you to find your own place. There's a difference. Where am I supposed to go? I can't afford anything in this city." "Then maybe you need to work more hours, or find a roommate, or move back in with Mom, but you can't stay here anymore." Naomi stared at me like I'd slapped her. "I can't believe you're doing this. Your own sister. What happened to you? You used to be nice. You used to care about family." "I do care about family," I said quietly. "But caring about family doesn't mean setting myself on fire to keep you warm. What the fuck does that even mean? It means I'm done. I need you to be out by the end of the month." What? She called me every name she could think of, told me I was selfish, cold, cruel, said I'd changed, that I wasn't the sister she knew. She cried, she yelled, she slammed doors. But I didn't change my mind. My first therapy appointment was 3 days later. Dr. Chen's office was small and comfortable, with soft lighting and plants in the corners. She was in her 50s, with silver-streaked hair, pulled back in a loose bun, and warm, intelligent eyes that seemed to actually see me. "Tell me what brought you here," she said after the initial pleasantries. And I started crying. Just broke down right there in her office before I'd even really said anything. All the years of holding it together, of being strong, of never letting anyone see me struggle, it all came pouring out in ugly, gasping sobs. Dr. Chen handed me tissues and waited, didn't try to fix it, didn't tell me it was okay, just waited, patient and present, until I could breathe again. "I'm sorry," I said, wiping my eyes. I'm not usually like this." "What are you usually like?" she asked gently. "Strong, put together, the person everyone else leans on." And how's that working for you? I almost laughed. Not well, apparently. Over the next hour, I told her everything. About my childhood, my father leaving, my mother's struggles, about raising Naomi, about Robert, about the endless cycle of giving that had consumed my entire adult life, about the birthday, about asking Naomi to leave, about the crushing guilt that came with finally setting a boundary. Dr. Chen listened to all of it without judgment, taking occasional notes. Olivia, she said when I'd finished, can I ask you something? When was the last time someone in your family did something for you? Not as a transaction, not because you'd done something for them first, but just because they wanted to show you love? I opened my mouth to answer and realised I couldn't. I genuinely could not think of a single instance. That's what I thought, she said softly. What you're describing is a pattern of emotional neglect and financial exploitation. And I want you to understand something important. Setting boundaries with people who take advantage of you isn't cruel. It's necessary. It's survival. But they're my family, I said, and my voice sounded small, childlike. Family should love you, not use you. There's a difference between helping someone and enabling them, between supporting someone and sacrificing yourself to your own detriment. You've been told your whole life that your value comes from what you can do for others. But your value, your inherent worth as a human being, has nothing to do with your usefulness. I cried again, but this time the tears felt different. Not desperate or ashamed, but releasing, like something toxic was finally draining out of me. Naomi moved out 2 weeks later, after a fortnight of cold shoulders and passive-aggressive comments. She took all her things and left without saying goodbye. I came home from work to find her key on the kitchen counter and a note that said simply, "Hope you're happy now." The apartment felt enormous and quiet without her. And I was happy. Guilty about being happy, but happy nonetheless. I cleaned the entire place, scrubbing away months of accumulated mess and chaos. I rearranged furniture. I bought fresh flowers for the table, just because I wanted to, just because they were beautiful. I made my space mine again. For the first time in over a year, I could breathe in my own home. My mother called the day after Naomi moved out. "How could you do this to your sister?" she demanded, not even bothering with hello. "She came here crying, telling me you threw her out, after everything she's been through, after all the time she needed you." "I didn't throw her out," I said calmly. I was getting better at staying calm. Chen and I had been practicing. I asked her to find her own place after she lived with me, rent-free for over a year. She couldn't afford to pay you. She could afford to go out drinking multiple times a week. She could afford new clothes and makeup. She just couldn't afford to contribute to the household she was living in. "You've changed, Olivia. You've become cold, selfish. I don't even recognize you anymore." "Maybe you never really knew me," I said quietly. "Maybe you only knew the version of me that said yes to everything. Don't you dare." "Mom, when's my birthday?" Silence. "It was 3 weeks ago," I continued. "Did you call? Did you text? Did you even remember?" "I've been busy. I've had a lot going on. You're always busy, always dealing with something, and I'm always expected to help, to understand, to put my own needs aside. But when was the last time you asked me how I was doing? Really asked and actually listened to the answer. I'm your mother. You're supposed to take care of me." The words hung in the air, stark and revealing in their honesty. "No, Mom," I said. "Children are supposed to take care of their elderly parents when those parents can no longer care for themselves. You're 62, working, capable, and I'm your daughter, not your retirement plan, not your therapist, not your ATM. After everything I did for you, you did what you were supposed to do as a parent. You fed me, clothed me, kept a roof over my head. That was your job. That doesn't mean I owe you my entire life in return." She hung up on me. I sat there with the phone in my hand, shaking, but also feeling strangely powerful. I just said things I'd never said before, things I'd barely let myself think, and the world hadn't ended. My mother was angry, yes, but she'd been angry before. Her anger was her problem to manage, not mine to fix. The next few months were a process of disentanglement. My mother tried guilt, sent long, rambling texts about how disappointed she was, how she'd raised me better than this, how family was supposed to stick together. I read them and felt the old familiar pull, but I didn't respond. Dr. Chen had taught me that not every message requires a response. Naomi tried manipulation. She'd call crying, telling me about some crisis or another, asking for money just this once. I listened, expressed sympathy, but didn't offer financial help. The first few times were agonizing, but it got easier. Dylan, who is now 6 years old, was the hardest. I loved that kid. Had spent countless hours with him, reading him stories, playing with him, trying to be a stable presence in his chaotic life. But Naomi had started using him as a weapon, having him call me to ask for things, telling him that Aunt Olivia didn't love him anymore because she wouldn't help. I had to set boundaries there too, had to limit contact, even though it broke my heart. You're protecting yourself, Dr. Chen reminded me. That's not selfish, that's healthy. I started putting money into savings again. Not much, just $50 or $100 each paycheck. But watching the account grow felt like reclaiming something essential. Proof that my work, my effort could benefit me too. I reconnected with old friends who I'd let fade away. Rachel, who I'd known since college, was thrilled when I reached out. We started meeting for coffee every Sunday morning. She never made me feel guilty for the years I'd been absent, just welcomed me back with open arms. I always wondered why you disappeared, she admitted during one of our coffee dates, but I figured you had your reasons. I'm just glad you're back. We'd talk about everything: books, work, relationships, life. And the revolutionary thing was that she'd ask about me. Actually wanted to know how I was doing, what I was thinking, what I was feeling. Conversations with her weren't just me listening to someone else's problems. They were reciprocal, balanced, nourishing. I'd forgotten what that felt like. I also started doing things just for myself. Small things at first. Buying myself flowers, taking long baths, sleeping in on Saturdays instead of rushing to help with someone else's emergency. Then bigger things. I signed up for a pottery class at the community centre. I'd always been drawn to pottery, to the idea of creating something beautiful with my hands, but I'd never had the time or money to pursue it. The first class was intimidating. I was surrounded by people who seemed to know what they were doing, who made throwing pots look effortless. My first bowl was lopsided and cracked in the kiln, but I kept going back. There was something deeply therapeutic about working with clay, about the way it required complete presence. You couldn't be thinking about your mother's latest complaint or your sister's latest drama while centering clay on a wheel. You had to be there, fully there, focused on the feeling of the clay under your hands, the subtle adjustments of pressure and speed. My instructor, Patricia, was a woman in her 60s with permanently clay-stained fingers and a gentle, encouraging manner. She never seemed frustrated by my mistakes, just showed me how to fix them or start over. Pottery teaches patience, she told me once, watching me struggle with a particularly stubborn piece. It teaches you that sometimes things collapse, and that's okay. You just start again. The clay doesn't judge you for failing, it's just clay waiting for you to try again. I thought about that a lot, about how I'd spent my whole life terrified of failing, of disappointing people, of not being good enough. But the clay didn't care, it just was. And I could work with it, fail, try again, fail better, improve gradually without the weight of anyone's expectations or disappointments. After a few months, I made my first successful mug. It was simple, nothing fancy, but it was mine. I'd shaped it with my own hands from nothing into something. When I used it for my morning coffee, I felt a strange sense of pride and accomplishment. I'd created something, not for anyone else, not to solve someone's problem or meet someone's need, just because I wanted to. Part 5. The Reckoning. I thought naively that the hardest part was over, that I'd set my boundaries, that my family would eventually accept them, and that we'd all move on to some new, healthier dynamic. I was wrong. It was April, 7 months after I'd asked Naomi to leave, when things escalated. I came home from work to find my car had been keyed. Long, deliberate scratches along both sides, deep enough that I knew it would cost hundreds to repair. My stomach dropped when I saw it. Then I noticed my apartment door. Someone had spray-painted "Selfish Bitch" across it in red paint. I stood there in the parking lot, shaking, my keys clutched in my hand. I knew, without having to ask, who was responsible. Knew it in my bones. I called the police and filed a report. They took pictures, asked questions, but told me that without proof, there wasn't much they could do. I could have told them who I suspected, but what would that accomplish? It would just make things worse. I called a locksmith and had my locks changed. Scrubbed the paint off my door as best I could. Got quotes for the car repair that made me want to cry. And then I did something I never thought I'd do. I called a lawyer. Her name was Jennifer Reeves, and she specialised in family law. A co-worker had recommended her when I'd mentioned vaguely that I was having issues with family members who wouldn't respect boundaries. "Tell me everything," Jennifer said, pen poised over a legal pad. So I did. The whole story. The years of financial support, the lack of repayment, Naomi living with me rent-free, the vandalism. I showed her my spreadsheet, my bank statements, text messages where my family members had asked for money. Jennifer listened intently, occasionally asking clarifying questions. When I finished, she sat back in her chair. "Okay," she said. "First thing, you need to document everything from this point forward. Every interaction, every message, every incident. Second, you need to send a formal cease and desist letter to your mother and sister, making it clear that you don't want to be contacted unless it's a genuine emergency. Third, we need to talk about the possibility of pursuing legal action to recover some of what you're owed." "I don't want to sue my family," I said quickly. The thought made me feel sick. "I understand, but I want you to be prepared for the possibility that they might sue you." I stared at her. "For what?" People who feel entitled to your resources sometimes react very badly when those resources are withdrawn. They can get creative. I've seen cases where family members sue for emotional distress or claim they were promised things they were never actually promised. I'm not saying your family will do this, but given the vandalism, it's clear they're escalating. We need to protect you. The room felt like it was tilting. This was my family. My mother, my sister. How had it come to this? "I know this is hard," Jennifer said gently, "but you need to understand. Their behaviour is not normal, not healthy, and you have every right to protect yourself." I sent the cease and desist letters the following week, one to my mother, one to Naomi. They were formal, legal-sounding documents that essentially said, "Stop harassing me, stop vandalising my property, only contact me in genuine emergencies." My mother called within an hour of receiving hers. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail. 15 minutes of her crying, yelling, asking how I could do this, calling me cruel and heartless. I saved it, as Jennifer had instructed, but I didn't call back. Naomi's response came via text. "I can't believe you got a lawyer. You're actually insane. Mom's right about you." Then, for a blissful 2 weeks, nothing. Silence, peace. I started to think maybe they'd finally accepted the boundaries. Then Dylan showed up at my door. He was 6 years old, standing in the hallway of my apartment building with tears streaming down his face. Alone, no adult in sight. My heart nearly stopped. "Dylan," I knelt down to his level. "Baby, what are you doing here? Where's your mom?" "She said to come talk to you," he sobbed. "She said you don't love me anymore. She said you're being mean to her and Grandma and that you hate us now." I felt fury rise in me, white hot and overwhelming. To use a child like this, to send him here, alone, as an emotional weapon, it was unconscionable. But Dylan didn't need to see my anger. He needed reassurance. "Come inside, sweetie," I said, taking his hand. "I'm going to call your mom to come get you, okay? And while we wait, we can have some juice and cookies." I got him settled on the couch with snacks and cartoons, then went to my bedroom and called Naomi. "You sent a 6-year-old child to my apartment alone," I said, my voice shaking with controlled rage. "He walked here by himself. Anything could have happened to him." "I knew he'd be safe," she said defensively. "You live like 10 minutes away. He's 6. He crossed major streets by himself. Are you insane?" "Don't call me insane. You're the one who abandoned your family. I told him to tell you how sad we all are, how much he misses you. Maybe if you heard it from him. You used your child as a manipulation tool. That's not just wrong, Naomi. It's potentially illegal. I'm documenting this. And if you ever send him here alone again, I'm calling Child Protective Services." She hung up on me. When she came to pick up Dylan 20 minutes later, she wouldn't look at me, just grabbed his hand and pulled him toward the stairs. "Bye, Aunt Liv," Dylan said, looking back at me with confused, sad eyes. "Bye, sweetie," I managed. "I love you." After they left, I sat on my couch and cried. For Dylan, who was being raised by someone who'd use him as a pawn. For the relationship with my nephew, that was probably over now. For the family I'd never really had, but kept hoping might somehow, someday materialize. I emailed Jennifer about the incident. Her response was immediate. This confirms they're escalating. We need to consider a restraining order. I didn't want a restraining order. The thought of it felt too extreme, too dramatic. Restraining orders were for dangerous situations, for abusive ex-partners, not for family members who were just difficult. But Jennifer was firm. Vandalism is a crime. Using a child to harass you is not okay. This pattern of behaviour is concerning. At minimum, we should prepare the paperwork so it's ready if we need it. So we prepared it, and I hoped we'd never have to file it. That hope lasted 3 weeks. It was a Saturday morning. I was at the farmer's market, something I'd started doing again now that my weekends weren't consumed by family obligations. I was looking at fresh tomatoes, chatting with the vendor about heirloom varieties, when my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Is this Olivia Price? A man's voice, formal and unfamiliar. Yes? This is Deputy Reynolds with the County Sheriff's Office. You're being served with a lawsuit. I'm at your residence now. When can you be available to accept service? My stomach dropped. A lawsuit for what? You'll need to review the documents, ma'am. When can you be home? I drove home in a daze, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. A lawsuit. My family was actually suing me. The deputy was waiting in my building's lobby. He handed me a thick envelope of papers and had me sign for them. Then he left, and I stood there staring at the envelope like it might explode. Inside my apartment, I finally opened it. The lawsuit was filed by Marcus Price, my mother. She was suing me for financial elder abuse and malicious abandonment, claiming I'd promised to support her in her old age and then reneged on that promise, causing her severe emotional distress and financial hardship. She was seeking $50,000 in damages. $50,000. I read the document 3 times, trying to make sense of it. Financial elder abuse, malicious abandonment. These were things abusers did to vulnerable elderly people, not things that adult children did by setting boundaries with perfectly capable parents. The lawsuit claimed I'd coerced her into accepting my financial support, creating a dependency, and then cruelly withdrawn that support without warning. It claimed I'd promised to always be there for her. It claimed my actions had caused her to suffer anxiety, depression, and health problems. It was a masterpiece of manipulation, taking every act of generosity I'd ever extended and twisting it into evidence of wrongdoing. I called Jennifer immediately. They actually did it, I said, my voice hollow. They're suing me. Forward me the documents, she said calmly. We'll file a response. And Olivia, this is good in a way. How is this good? Because now it's all on record, everything you've been dealing with. We'll counter-sue for harassment, and we'll get the restraining order approved easily now. They've shown their hand. Part 6. The truth comes out. The next few months were a blur of legal proceedings, document gathering, and emotional turmoil. Jennifer was amazing. She took my spreadsheets, my bank statements, my saved text messages and voicemails, and built a comprehensive picture of years of financial exploitation. She deposed my mother and Naomi, asked them pointed questions under oath that revealed the inconsistencies in their claims. But the process was exhausting. Every day felt like I was reliving all the worst moments of my relationship with my family. Every document I had to review was a reminder of how much I'd given, how little I'd received, how blind I'd been for so long. Dr. Chen helped me process it all. Twice weekly sessions where I could rage and cry and slowly, gradually come to terms with the reality of my situation. You're grieving, she told me. Not just the family you had, but the family you thought you had. The family you hoped they might become. That's a real loss, and it's okay to mourn it. I also had to tell people at work what was happening. I'd been distracted, stressed, showing up late sometimes because of lawyer meetings. My supervisor, Maria, pulled me aside one day and asked if everything was okay. I broke down and told her everything. She listened, then pulled me into a hug. Take whatever time you need, she said. Family stuff is hard. Legal stuff is harder. We'll cover for you. Just take care of yourself. The kindness of it, the unconditional support from someone who owed me nothing, made me cry harder. As Jennifer dug deeper into my family's finances, preparing our countersuit, she discovered something I hadn't known. My mother had been telling people, including some of her friends and distant relatives, that I'd been financially supporting her because I owed her. That when I was younger, I'd stolen money from her and she'd never pressed charges because I was her daughter, but I'd promised to pay her back over time. It was completely untrue. I'd never stolen anything from anyone. But she'd been using this lie to explain why I'd been giving her money, to make herself look like the victim, to make me look like the criminal. When Jennifer told me this, I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. "She's been destroying your reputation," Jennifer said. "We have sworn statements from 3 people who heard her tell this story. This is defamation. We can use this." But more the implications, I was devastated by the betrayal. My mother had been lying about me, turning me into the villain in her story, even as I'd been sacrificing everything to help her. Then Jennifer uncovered something else. Naomi had been posting about me on social media. Long, detailed posts about how I'd abandoned her and Dylan, how I'd thrown them out during a vulnerable time, how I was cold and heartless. She'd shared our private text messages, carefully edited to make me look bad. She'd posted photos of Dylan looking sad with captions like, "Missing Aunt Olivia who doesn't have time for us anymore." Her friends had left comments full of sympathy for her and judgment for me. I'd been tried and convicted in the court of public opinion without even knowing there was a trial. Jennifer added it all to our case. Screenshot after screenshot of defamation, of harassment, of a coordinated campaign to damage my reputation and emotional well-being. The deeper we dug, the more we discovered. Naomi had never paid taxes on the money I'd given her, had treated it as gifts rather than income, even though the amounts were substantial enough to require reporting. When the IRS came asking questions, she told them I'd promised to cover any tax implications, which was completely false. My mother had been taking out credit cards in my name, or trying to. Jennifer discovered 3 applications that had been denied, all using my information. If my credit hadn't been frozen, something Jennifer had advised me to do early in the process, my mother might have successfully committed identity theft. Each new discovery was a gut punch. Each one revealed depths of betrayal I hadn't imagined possible, but each one also strengthened our case. We went to trial in October, just over a year after I'd asked Naomi to move out. The courthouse was cold and intimidating. My mother and Naomi sat on one side with their lawyer, a man who looked barely out of law school and seemed uncomfortable with the whole case. I sat on the other side with Jennifer, who was calm and confident. The judge was a woman in her 60s named Judge Martinez. She had sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor that made me hopeful. My mother's lawyer presented their case first. He claimed I'd created a dependency, made promises I didn't keep, caused psychological harm through my sudden and cruel withdrawal of support. Then Jennifer stood up. She presented our evidence methodically, piece by piece. The spreadsheets showing years of financial support with no repayment, text messages showing my family's constant demands, the vandalism report, the incident with Dylan being sent to my apartment alone, the social media posts, the attempted credit card fraud, the defamatory statements. She called character witnesses, my supervisor Maria, my friend Rachel, even Patricia from my pottery class, who testified about the positive changes they'd seen in me since I'd set boundaries, about how I'd seemed exhausted and depleted before, and how I'd gradually returned to life. She called a financial expert who testified about the amount I'd given to my family over the years, over $60,000 when you added it all up. $60,000 that I'd never see again. The courtroom was silent as the number hung in the air. Then Jennifer called me to the stand. Testifying was one of the hardest things I've ever done. I had to recount in detail years of manipulation and exploitation. Had to explain how I'd been conditioned from childhood to believe my worth came from my usefulness. Had to describe the birthday they forgot, the marriage that fell apart, the slow erosion of my sense of self. My mother's lawyer tried to paint me as cold and uncaring, asked me how I could turn my back on family, how I could watch my own mother struggle and not help. I helped for years, I said quietly. I helped until I had nothing left to give, until I was drowning. And when I asked for the tiniest bit of reciprocity, when I needed help, there was no one there. But she's your mother, he pressed. Yes, I agreed. And mothers are supposed to love their children, not exploit them. He asked about Naomi, about how I could kick out a struggling single mother. She wasn't struggling because of circumstances beyond her control, I said. She was struggling because she refused to take responsibility for her own life. I enabled that for over a year. I gave her time and space and support to get back on her feet, and she used that time to party and spend money she didn't have. I didn't kick her out. I asked her to live independently, like the adult she is. What about your nephew? Don't you care that your actions have affected him? That one hurt. I love Dylan more than almost anything, but the best thing I can do for him is model what healthy boundaries look like. Teach him, even from a distance, that people can't treat you however they want just because you share DNA. When I stepped down from the stand, I was shaking but also felt strangely light. I'd spoken my truth, let it be on record. Whatever happened now, at least I'd been honest. Judge Martinez took 2 weeks to review everything and issue her ruling. When we returned to court for the verdict, I could barely breathe. My entire future felt like it hung in the balance. If the judge ruled in my mother's favour, I'd owe $50,000 I didn't have. I'd be bankrupted by the very people who'd already taken so much from me. Judge Martinez entered and we all stood. She sat down, looked at her notes, then looked directly at my mother and Naomi. I've reviewed all the evidence in this case, she said, her voice firm and clear. And I have to say, I'm appalled. My heart leapt. Miss Price, the plaintiff, you've attempted to use this court system to continue exploiting your daughter. The evidence shows clearly that she supported you financially for years, far beyond any reasonable expectation of filial duty. She did this out of love and a misguided sense of obligation that you deliberately cultivated and exploited. My mother's face went red. Your claim of malicious abandonment is without merit. Your daughter didn't abandon you. She established healthy boundaries after years of being used as an ATM. The fact that you responded to those boundaries with vandalism, harassment, and this frivolous lawsuit tells me everything I need to know about your character. Judge Martinez turned to me. Miss Price, the defendant, I'm ruling in your favour on all counts. The lawsuit against you is dismissed with prejudice. Furthermore, I'm granting the restraining order your lawyer has requested. Your mother and sister are to have no contact with you for a period of 2 years, except through legal representation. I felt tears spring to my eyes. Additionally, the judge continued, I'm ordering the plaintiffs to pay your legal fees and court costs, and I'm referring this case to the district attorney's office for possible charges of harassment and attempted fraud. She banged her gavel. This court is adjourned. Outside the courthouse, I collapsed into Jennifer's arms, sobbing. It's over, she said, rubbing my back. It's over, Olivia. You're free. Free. The word felt foreign and wonderful. My mother and Naomi left through a different exit. I didn't see them, didn't want to. As far as I was concerned, that chapter of my life was closed. Part 7. Rebuilding. The months after the trial were strange. Quiet in a way I wasn't used to. No constant phone calls, no demands, no crises to manage. Just peace. At first, the silence felt uncomfortable. I'd spent so many years in survival mode, constantly juggling everyone else's needs, that I didn't know what to do with myself when there was no one to save. Dr. Chen helped me navigate it. You're learning how to exist without being needed, she explained. That's a fundamental shift in identity. It's going to take time. I threw myself into pottery, started going to the studio 4 or 5 times a week. My skills improved dramatically. Patricia started suggesting I might want to sell some of my pieces. You've got real talent, she said, examining a set of bowls I'd made, smooth and even, with a beautiful turquoise glaze. Have you thought about doing this more seriously? I hadn't. Pottery had been my escape, my therapy. The idea of turning it into something more felt both exciting and terrifying, but I started to consider it, started to imagine what a different life might look like. I also started dating N tentatively. Nothing serious, just coffee dates and casual dinners, learning what it felt like to let someone get to know me without the chaos of family drama. consuming everything. I met a man named David at a friend's birthday party. He was an architect, soft-spoken and thoughtful, with kind eyes and a genuine interest in hearing about my pottery. We went on a few dates. He was nice, uncomplicated. But after a few weeks, I realised I wasn't ready. Wasn't sure I'd ever be ready to let someone that close again. I need to focus on myself right now, I told him over coffee. I'm sorry. He nodded, disappointed but understanding. I get it. For what it's worth, I think you're pretty incredible. When you're ready, you're going to make someone very happy. It was one of the kindest rejections I'd ever witnessed. The restraining order meant I heard nothing from my family directly, but I heard things through the grapevine, through mutual acquaintances, through social media posts from people connected to them. Apparently, my mother had lost her case to avoid paying my legal fees and was struggling financially. Apparently, Naomi had moved in with a new boyfriend and was already having problems. Apparently, Dylan had started having behavioural issues at school. Each piece of news pulled at me, made me want to reach out, to help, to fix things. But I didn't, because I'd learned, finally, that I couldn't fix other people's lives. They had to do that themselves. And my attempts to help had only enabled their dysfunction, prolonged their inability to take responsibility for their own choices. It was one of the hardest lessons I'd ever learned. For my 36th birthday, Rachel threw me a surprise party. Nothing elaborate, just a gathering at her apartment with a few close friends, homemade lasagna and a chocolate cake. But everyone there was someone who genuinely cared about me, who showed up because they wanted to, not because they needed something. They gave me thoughtful gifts, a new pottery tool set from Patricia, a beautiful journal from my book club, a gift certificate for a massage from Maria. And when they sang happy birthday, I cried. But these were good tears, grateful tears. Thank you, I said, looking around at all these people. You have no idea how much this means to me. You deserve to be celebrated, Rachel said, squeezing my hand. You deserve people who show up for you the way you show up for others. It was the best birthday I'd ever had. 6 months after the trial, I made a big decision. I'd been saving money aggressively. The money that used to go to my family was now going into my savings account. I'd built it back up to nearly $20,000. Not what it had been before I'd started supporting my family, but enough to take a leap. I decided to open my own pottery studio. It was terrifying. I'd never run a business before, had no idea if I could make it work. But I was tired of playing it safe, tired of living small. I found a space in an arts collective downtown, a small storefront with big windows and exposed brick walls. The rent was reasonable, and the location was perfect. Other artists had studios in the same building, creating a community of creativity. I spent months preparing, took business classes at the community college, applied for a small business loan, designed a logo and a website, built inventory, mugs, vases, plates, each one handmade. I named it Olivia's Place. Simple, true, mine. Opening day was in March, almost 2 years after I'd asked Naomi to leave my apartment. Rachel and Patricia helped me set up. We arranged pottery on shelves, hung plants in the windows, set up a small seating area where I could teach classes. The space felt magical, full of possibility and hope. I'd invited everyone who'd supported me through the hardest period of my life. They came bearing flowers and champagne and so much love I could barely contain it. To Olivia, Rachel toasted, raising her glass, who taught us all what it looks like to choose yourself, to set boundaries, to build a life that reflects your worth. We're so proud of you. I looked around at all these faces, people who saw me, valued me, celebrated me for who I was, not what I could do for them, and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Joy. Pure, uncomplicated joy. The studio was more successful than I dared to hope. I taught beginner pottery classes 3 evenings a week and Saturday mornings. My students ranged from college kids looking for a creative outlet to retirees seeking a new hobby. Watching them discover the same peace and satisfaction I'd found in working with clay was deeply fulfilling. I also sold my pieces, both in the studio and online. I'd started an Instagram account showcasing my work, and to my surprise, it gained a following. People connected with the simplicity and honesty of my designs. Orders started coming in from all over the country. Within 6 months, I was making enough to cover rent, supplies, and pay myself a modest salary. Within a year, I was actually profitable. But more than the financial success, what mattered was how I felt. I woke up excited about my day, looked forward to going to work, felt proud of what I was building. I was creating something beautiful, something meaningful, something entirely my own, and no one could take it from me. My 37th birthday came and went, quietly celebrated with friends exactly as I wanted it. Then my 38th. Time was moving forward and I was moving with it, no longer stuck in patterns that had defined my entire life. I expanded the studio, taking over an adjacent space to add more equipment and a small gallery area. I hired an assistant, a young woman named Sophie, who was studying ceramics at the local art college and needed part-time work. Teaching her reminded me how far I'd come from those first lopsided bowls. I even started dating again, this time more seriously. His name was Thomas, and he was a high school art teacher with a dry sense of humour, an enormous capacity for empathy. He'd been through his own family trauma. His parents had been addicts, and he'd spent years in therapy learning to establish boundaries. So he understood my journey in a way few people could. "You're not responsible for fixing everyone," he told me early in our relationship, when I'd expressed guilt about my family. "You can love people and still protect yourself from them. Those things aren't mutually exclusive." We took things slow. I was cautious about letting anyone too close, about trusting someone with the vulnerable parts of myself. But Thomas was patient. He showed up consistently. He respected my boundaries. He celebrated my successes without trying to take credit for them. And slowly, carefully, I let him in. Part 8. Echoes from the Past. It was late autumn when I heard from my family again. The restraining order had expired 6 months earlier. I'd been relieved when it did, hoping it meant I could finally close that chapter completely. The silence had been golden. 2 years without drama, without demands, without the constant emotional turbulence that had defined my life for so long. I was at the studio late one Tuesday evening, finishing up a custom order, when my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Olivia?" A woman's voice, uncertain and unfamiliar. "Yes, this is Linda Chen. I'm a social worker with Mercy General Hospital. I'm calling about your mother, Diane Price." My stomach dropped. "Is she okay?" "She's stable, but she's been admitted with pneumonia and some complications from unmanaged diabetes. She's going to be here for at least a week. She listed you as her emergency contact." I felt the old familiar pull, the need to drop everything, to rush to the hospital to fix things, but I also felt something new, hesitation. "Is she able to make decisions for herself?" I asked. "Yes, she's fully conscious and coherent, but she's asking for you." I took a deep breath. "I need to think about it. Can I call you back?" Linda gave me her number, and I hung up. For a long moment, I just sat there in my studio, surrounded by my pottery, the life I'd built, trying to figure out what I felt. Concern, definitely. Despite everything, I didn't want my mother to suffer or die. But I also felt protected, like I was standing behind a wall I'd built brick by brick, and stepping out from behind it would undo all the work I'd done to heal. I called Dr. Chen. Even though I'd reduced my therapy sessions to once a month, I still checked in when I needed guidance. "What do you want to do?" she asked after I'd explained the situation. "I don't know. Part of me thinks I should go. She's my mother. She's sick. What kind of person doesn't visit their sick mother? And another part of you is terrified that if I go, I'll get sucked back in, that she'll use this as an opportunity to guilt me, manipulate me, pull me back into that dynamic." "Both of those feelings are valid," Dr. Chen said. "The question is, can you visit her while maintaining your boundaries? Can you show compassion without sacrificing your well-being?" I thought about that. I don't know. "Then maybe you start by asking yourself, what would visiting accomplish? What are you hoping for?" And that was the real question, wasn't it? Was I hoping for reconciliation, for an apology, for her to finally see me, understand what she'd done, acknowledge the harm? Or was I just responding to old programming, the belief that good daughters show up no matter what? I talked to Thomas about it that evening over dinner. "I don't know what the right thing to do is," I admitted, pushing pasta around my plate. I don't want her to die thinking I hate her, but I also don't want to open myself up to more hurt. You don't owe her anything, Thomas said gently. You've already given her more than most people would. If you decide not to go, that doesn't make you a bad person. But what if something happens? What if she dies and I never got to? I don't know. Have closure? Closure doesn't always come from the other person, he said. Sometimes you have to find it within yourself. Sometimes the person who hurt you never gives you what you need, and you have to make peace with that. He was right. I knew he was right. But knowing something intellectually and feeling it emotionally were two different things. I decided to go, but on my terms. I called Linda back and asked about visiting hours. Then I set conditions for myself. I would visit once. I would stay for 30 minutes. If my mother started manipulating, guilting, or asking for money, I would leave immediately. I would bring Thomas with me for support. Thomas squeezed my hand when I told him the plan. I'll be right there with you and we can leave whenever you want. We went the next day. The hospital was sterile and too bright, with that distinctive smell of antiseptic and illness. My mother was in a semi-private room, separated from another patient by a thin curtain. She looked small in the hospital bed, older than I remembered, her skin pale and her breathing laboured. For a moment, seeing her like that, I felt a rush of sympathy. This was still my mother. Still the woman who'd raised me, who'd struggled and survived, who'd done the best she could with what she had. But then she saw me and her expression changed. First surprise, then something calculating. And I remembered. My mother's struggles didn't excuse her choices. Her pain didn't justify the pain she'd caused me. Olivia, she said, her voice weak. You came. Hi, Mom. I stayed near the door, Thomas a solid presence beside me. I heard you were sick. How are you feeling? Terrible. The doctors say I have pneumonia and my diabetes is out of control. They're talking about keeping me for over a week. That sounds serious. I'm glad you're getting treatment. She looked at Thomas. Who's this? This is Thomas, my partner. Something flickered in her eyes. Resentment, maybe, that I had someone that I'd built a life she wasn't part of. Nice to meet you, she said, though her tone suggested otherwise. An uncomfortable silence settled over the room. The social worker says you don't have insurance, I said, keeping my voice neutral. My mother's eyes welled with tears. I couldn't afford it. Things have been so hard, Olivia. Ever since we stopped talking, I've been struggling. There it was, the guilt trip, right on schedule. I'm sorry things have been difficult, I said carefully, but you're getting care now, and that's what matters. The bills are going to be enormous. I don't know how I'll pay them. I thought maybe... Mom, I can't help you financially. We talked about this. I'm your mother. I'm sick. And you're just going to let me drown in medical debt? You're not drowning. You'll work out a payment plan with the hospital. There are programs for people without insurance, but I can't be your solution. Her face hardened. You've changed. You used to care about family. I still care about family, but I also care about myself, and I've learned that I can't sacrifice my well-being to fix everyone else's problems. This isn't a problem, Olivia. This is life and death. What if I die? What if you could have helped me and you didn't? And I die? I felt Thomas's hand on my back, steadying me. Mom, you're not dying. You have pneumonia. The doctors are treating it. And even if you were dying, guilting me about money wouldn't be the way to spend your last days. She turned away from me, tears streaming down her face, but they felt performative, calculated. I'd seen this show too many times. I think we should go, I said quietly. I'm glad you're getting care. I hope you feel better soon. That's it? You're just leaving? Yes. You're heartless. You know that? Absolutely heartless. I don't know where I went wrong with you. The words stung, but they didn't devastate me the way they once would have. Because I knew the truth now. I wasn't heartless. I was self-protecting. There was a difference. Goodbye, Mom, I said. Thomas and I left the room. I didn't look back. In the hospital parking lot, I broke down. Thomas held me while I cried, not for what had just happened, but for everything, for the mother I'd wanted and never had, for the relationship I'd hoped for that would never materialise, for the finality of accepting that some things can't be fixed. You did good in there, Thomas said, stroking my hair. You held your boundaries. I'm proud of you. It doesn't feel good, I sobbed. No, But sometimes doing the right thing doesn't feel good, it just feels necessary. We sat in his car for a long time, me crying and him holding me, until the tears finally stopped and I could breathe again. "I don't think I'll go back," I said finally. I thought maybe seeing her would give me closure, but it didn't. It just reminded me why I needed distance in the first place. "That's okay," Thomas said. "You tried. That's all you can do." My mother was released from the hospital a week later. I heard about it through Linda, the social worker, who called to thank me for coming and to let me know my mother was being discharged to a rehabilitation facility for a few weeks. "She'll be okay," Linda said. "She's stubborn. She'll pull through." After that, silence again. No calls from my mother. No attempts at contact. Maybe she'd finally accepted that I wasn't going to be her safety net. Or maybe she'd just found someone else to lean on. Either way, I was at peace with it. Part 9. Full circle. 2 years after that hospital visit, I was 39 years old and living a life I'd never imagined possible. The studio was thriving. I'd published a coffee table book about the meditative practice of pottery, which had sold surprisingly well. I'd been featured in several regional magazines as a local entrepreneur and artist. I'd started teaching weekend workshops that people travelled from other states to attend. Thomas and I had moved in together, a small house with a backyard where I could garden and a shed he'd converted into a home studio for me. We talked about marriage sometimes, casually, but neither of us felt rushed. We were building something solid, something real, and we had time. I had a circle of genuine friends, people who showed up for me the way I showed up for them. Reciprocal relationships that nourished rather than depleted me. I went to book club, to pottery association meetings, to dinner parties where I laughed until my sides hurt. I had savings, real savings, enough to feel secure, to handle emergencies, to invest in my business and my future. I was contributing to a retirement account, planning for the life I wanted to have at 60, at 70, at 80. I was happy, genuinely, deeply, consistently happy. And then, one Saturday morning in May, Naomi walked into my studio. I was helping a student with a problematic piece when I looked up and saw her standing in the doorway. She looked different, older, thinner, with shorter hair and tired eyes, but it was definitely her. My heart started pounding. I excused myself from my student and walked over to her. "Naomi?" "Hi." "Liv." She looked nervous, her hands twisting together. "Can we talk?" I glanced around the studio. Sophie was handling the other students and we were coming up on a break anyway. "Outside," I said. We stepped out onto the sidewalk in front of the studio. Spring sunlight filtered through the trees lining the street. People walked by with coffee cups and shopping bags, living their normal Saturday lives, while I stood facing my sister for the first time in 4 years. "What do you want?" I asked, not unkindly but not warmly either. "I wanted to see you, to talk to you. I've been working on myself, therapy, meetings, all that stuff, and my therapist suggested I try to make amends with people I've hurt." "So this is step 9? I asked. She had the grace to look embarrassed. "Kind of, yeah. But it's not just that. I really have been working on things, Liv. I have a full-time job now. I'm renting my own place, just a studio apartment, but it's mine. I'm paying my own bills. I'm actually being a parent to Dylan instead of dumping him on Mom all the time." "That's good," I said carefully. "I'm glad you're doing better." "I'm sober too, 6 months." I looked at her more closely and saw it, a clarity in her eyes that hadn't been there before. She looked healthier, more present. "That's really good, Naomi. I mean that." She nodded, blinking back tears. "I owe you an apology, a real one, for everything. For using you, for taking advantage of your kindness, for the vandalism, for sending Dylan to manipulate you, for the lawsuit, all of it. I was a terrible sister and you didn't deserve any of that." I felt something loosen in my chest. Not forgiveness, not yet, but the possibility of it. "Thank you for saying that," I said quietly. "I don't expect you to forgive me," she continued. "I know I don't deserve it, but I wanted you to know that I see it now. I see what I did, and I'm so, so sorry." We stood there in silence for a moment. A car drove by playing loud music. A couple walked past us laughing about something. "I forgive you," I heard myself say, and surprisingly, I meant it. Not in a "let's go back to how things were" way, but in a "I'm releasing this resentment so it doesn't poison me anymore" way. Naomi's eyes widened. Really? Really? But Naomi, forgiveness doesn't mean we go back to the way things were. I can forgive you and still maintain boundaries. I can hope you continue to do well and still not want to be closely involved in your life. She nodded, wiping tears from her cheeks. I understand. I just needed you to know that I'm trying. That I'm not that person anymore. I believe you, I said. And I did. Your studio is beautiful, by the way. Mom told me about it. She pretends she doesn't keep tabs on you, but she does. She's seen the articles about you, the features in magazines. She won't admit it, but I think she's proud. I didn't know what to do with that information. How is she? Managing. She's on disability now. Lives in a senior apartment complex. She has a boyfriend, this guy named Frank, who's pretty nice. Actually, takes care of her more than she deserves, honestly. She's still difficult, but she's his problem now, not mine. I've set boundaries with her too. Good for you. Dylan asks about you sometimes, Naomi said softly. He's 10 now, smart kid. Good kid despite having me as a mom. My heart ached at that. I'm glad he's doing well. Would you ever want to see him? No pressure. I'm not trying to manipulate you or anything, but if you ever wanted to, I'd make sure it happened. No strings attached. I thought about it. About Dylan with his dark curls and sweet smile. About the nephew I'd loved and lost. Maybe someday, I said honestly. Not right now, but maybe someday. That's fair. She pulled a piece of paper from her pocket. This is my number. New phone, new number. If you ever want to talk, or if you change your mind about seeing Dylan, you can reach me. But I won't bother you. I promise. I took the paper, folded it, put it in my pocket. Take care of yourself, Naomi. You too, Liv. Really, you look happy. I'm glad. She walked away and I watched her go, feeling a strange mix of emotions. Sadness for what we'd never been. Relief that she seemed to be changing. Hope that maybe years down the road we might have some kind of relationship. But also clarity that right now distance was still what I needed. I went back inside the studio. Sophie gave me a questioning look, but I just smiled and shook my head. I'd process it later, maybe in therapy, maybe with Thomas. For now, I had a class to teach. Part 10. Living Forward. That night, I told Thomas about Naomi's visit. We were cooking dinner together, something we did most nights, a ritual we both enjoyed. He was chopping vegetables while I stirred sauce on the stove, and the kitchen smelled like garlic and basil and home. How do you feel about it? He asked, always cutting to the heart of things. Honestly, I don't know. Glad she seems to be doing better. Sad about all the years we lost. Relieved that I don't feel obligated to jump back in and fix things for her. That's growth, he said, kissing my temple as he reached past me for the olive oil. I think so. A few years ago, I would have immediately tried to help her, to rebuild the relationship, to make up for lost time. But now, I'm okay with just letting it be what it is. If we reconnect someday, great. If we don't, that's okay too. You've come a long way, Olivia, I smiled. We both have. We ate dinner on the back porch, watching the sun set over our small garden. Thomas told me about his day, about a student who'd had a breakthrough in their art project. I told him about a new pottery technique I wanted to try. We talked about ordinary things, beautiful in their ordinariness. Later, lying in bed, I thought about the journey that had brought me here, the years of sacrifice and pain, the moment of breaking, the slow, difficult process of healing and rebuilding, the life I'd created on the other side of all that. It hadn't been easy. There had been days when I'd doubted myself, when the guilt had felt crushing, when I'd wondered if I was making a terrible mistake. But I'd pushed through. I'd done the work. I'd learned to value myself, to set boundaries, to build a life that reflected my worth rather than everyone else's needs. And now, at 39 years old, I finally understood what Robert had tried to tell me all those years ago. Being needed isn't the same as being loved. Real love doesn't demand constant sacrifice. Real love celebrates your wholeness, not your brokenness. Real love builds you up instead of tearing you down. On my 40th birthday, Thomas took me on a surprise trip to the coast. We stayed in a small bed and breakfast overlooking the ocean, spent our days walking on the beach, collecting shells, watching the waves, spent our evenings eating fresh seafood and talking about everything and nothing. On the last night, we sat on the beach watching the sunset. The sky was painted in shades of orange and pink purple. The ocean reflecting all that colour like a mirror. "I have something for you," Thomas said, pulling a small box from his pocket. My heart started racing. "Thomas, before you pan, it's not what you think." "Well, it is, but also it isn't." He opened the box to reveal a beautiful ring, not a diamond, but a piece of sea glass set in silver, smooth and green-blue like the ocean itself. "Olivia, I'm not asking you to marry me. Not yet, anyway. But I am asking if you'll continue building this life with me. If you'll let me love you, all of you, exactly as you are. If you'll trust that I'm not going anywhere, that I see you and value you for who you are, not what you can do for me." Tears streamed down my face. Yes, yes to all of that. He slipped the ring on my right hand, my own hand, not a traditional engagement hand, and kissed me as the sun dipped below the horizon. "I love you," he said. "Your strength, your vulnerability, your capacity for growth. All of it." "I love you too," I whispered. We sat there on that beach until the stars came out, just holding each other, and I felt complete in a way I'd never felt before. Not because I'd found someone to complete me, I'd learned I was already whole, but because I'd found someone who celebrated that wholeness instead of trying to diminish it. Epilogue. 2 years later, I'm 42 now, and my life looks nothing like I imagined it would when I was younger. I never got married. Thomas and I decided we didn't need a legal document to validate our commitment to each other. We're partners, every sense of the word, and that's enough. The studio expanded again. I now employ 3 people full-time and teach workshops across the country. My second book is being published next month. I've been invited to speak at conferences about entrepreneurship and creativity and the courage it takes to rebuild your life. I reconnected with Dylan last year. He's 12 now, thoughtful and creative, interested in photography. We meet for lunch once a month, just the 2 of us, and slowly we're building a relationship. I'm not trying to be his parent. He has one, and she's doing better than she used to be. But I can be his aunt. I can be someone stable and supportive in his life. Naomi and I talk occasionally, not often, maybe once every few months, but the conversations are real. She's still sober, still working on herself. We'll probably never be close the way some sisters are, but we're friendly. And that's okay. I haven't spoken to my mother in over 4 years. I heard she got married to Frank, the boyfriend Naomi mentioned. I hope she's happy. I hope she's found some peace. But I don't need to be part of her life to hope those things for her. I've learned that you can love people from a distance, that you can want good things for someone without subjecting yourself to their toxicity. That family isn't just about blood. It's about respect, reciprocity, and genuine care. My real family now is the one I've chosen. Thomas, who loves me unconditionally. Rachel and my other friends who show up for me consistently. My pottery students who bring joy and creativity into my life. Sophie and my other employees who've become like younger siblings. Patricia, who still mentors me even though I'm an established artist now. These are the people who celebrate my successes, who support me during struggles, who value me for who I am. These are the relationships that nourish my soul instead of draining it. Last week, a young woman came into my studio. She was in her mid-20s, looking lost and exhausted in a way I recognized immediately. "Can I help you?" I asked. "I saw your workshop schedule online," she said. I don't know, I need something that's just for me. Does that make sense?" "It makes perfect sense," I said, smiling. "Tell me about yourself." She started crying. Right there in my studio, she broke down and told me about her family, her mother who constantly needed help, her siblings who took advantage of her kindness, about how exhausted she was, how empty, how lost. I listened, really listened, and then I said, "I understand. More than you know, I understand. Can I tell you something? Setting boundaries with people you love isn't selfish. It's survival. And creating space for yourself, time, energy, resources that are just for you, that's not indulgent. It's necessary." She looked at me like I'd given her permission to breathe. I signed her up for a beginner pottery class, gave her a discount because I saw myself in her and wanted to help. And as she left, looking a little less lost than when she'd arrived, I thought about how far I'd come, from the girl who thought being needed was the same as being loved, to the woman who understood her own worth. It had taken 42 years, a broken marriage, a lawsuit, countless hours of therapy, and the courage to walk away from people who claimed to love me, but only knew how to use me. But I'd made it. I'd survived. More than that, I'd thrived. And if my story could help even one person find their own path to healing, then maybe all that pain had served a purpose after all. Tonight, I'm sitting on my back porch with a cup of tea, watching fireflies dance in the garden. Thomas is inside grading papers. A new pottery piece is drying in my home studio, a large vase with a glaze that reminds me of sunset. Tomorrow I'll teach a morning class, have lunch with Rachel, work on my new book in the afternoon, come home to Thomas and make dinner together. Simple things, beautiful things. This is my life now, built on my own terms, filled with people who actually love me, grounded in self-respect and healthy boundaries and the understanding that I am enough, exactly as I am. I survived the storm, I rebuilt from the wreckage, and now I'm finally truly living. Not for anyone else. For me. If this story touched something deep in your heart, if you've ever felt the weight of being needed more than being loved, if you're on your own journey of setting boundaries and reclaiming yourself, I want you to know you're not alone. Leave a small whisper in the comments below. Tell me your story, even if it's just a sentence or two. I'd love to hear from you. And if you'd like to listen to more stories like this, stories about the quiet courage it takes to choose yourself, about the strength in vulnerability, about finding your way home to yourself, just stay close. Subscribe, and let's keep walking this path together. You deserve to be more than needed. You deserve to be loved. Truly, wholly, unconditionally loved. And sometimes that journey starts with learning to love yourself enough to walk away from people who don't know how. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. Until next time, Olivia.